Far Cry 2 is probably the most controversial game in this franchise. Some people think that this is the best Far Cry game to date, while others hate it with passion. To be honest, when I played it for the first time back in 2008, I didn't really like this game. It was a very interesting concept, but some of the design choices in Far Cry 2 made it quite annoying sometimes. But now, almost 12 years later, I'm going to give this game another chance, because I'm curious to see how well it aged. And before we talk about the gameplay, let's try to find the answer to another question. Is it possible to play Far Cry 2 at 4K resolution and 144 FPS without any issues? The first thing that I've tried to do is cranked up every setting to the max and tested the performance in the built-in benchmark. Far Cry 2 supports DirectX 9 and DirectX 10 APIs, and performance on the first one was, well, not the best. As you can see on this graph from the benchmark report, on DirectX 9 the game almost never reached 144 FPS target. When I switched to DirectX 10, I was surprised to see that the performance actually got a lot better, which was contradicting with the guides that I read on the internet. But it was not perfect either. In some moments the game suddenly started to drop frames from 144 to 72 figures, which is strange considering this is exactly half of the FPS cap. By the way, I did all of the benchmark tests on the Ranch Lawn demo, because when I've tried to launch playback action scene, this happened. So, we have an issue. How can we fix it? Far Cry 2 has a quite impressive level of interactivity, even by modern standards. So, at first I thought that such performance issues were caused by fire and physics simulation. But to my surprise, that was not the case. After doing several tests, I can say for sure that the reason for those frame rate drops was anti-aliasing settings. When I lowered down anti-aliasing level while keeping everything else at max, performance was significantly improved and I finally managed to reach more or less stable 144 FPS on DirectX 10. DirectX 9 performance got better as well, but it was still the worst option. So if you have performance issues while running Far Cry 2 on your hardware, try lower down anti-aliasing and switch to DirectX 10. Okay, one thing is to reach 144 FPS, but the other thing is to play the game like that. You know, a lot of old games were made without high frame rates in mind, and could easily break if you'll try to play them at anything above 60 FPS. And unfortunately, Far Cry 2 is one of those games. Though so far I haven't seen any game breaking bugs, but I've discovered a lot of animation glitches and audio issues. NPCs in cutscenes can start bouncing while moving, and some of the dialogues and phone calls can abruptly end. But I can't say that those issues are critical, especially considering that the story in Far Cry 2 doesn't really matter. Actually, those amusing animation glitches added to the fun in some cases. Anyway, this time I'm determined to finish Far Cry 2, so if I'll discover any other technical issues, I'll mention them in my review. For now, enough about technical stuff, let's talk about the game itself. As I've said in the beginning of this video, Far Cry 2 split the fan base of this series, and I've seen completely opposite opinions about it. Unlike the original games that was developed by Crytek, Far Cry 2 was made by Ubisoft in-house studio. The new team dared to make some drastic changes to the core gameplay loop. They moved from linear story-driven experience to more open and emergent gameplay. That was a bold move indeed, but developers did a few missteps that turned the game into an extremely frustrating experience for some players. A lot of people hated Far Cry 2 because you couldn't drive in peace to the next mission without getting distracted by another fight. The guard posts in this game are placed almost on every crossroad, and it's not that easy to avoid them. Trying to clear them up is pointless as well, because enemies will respawn almost instantly once you leave. And even if you'll try to just drive through those posts without starting the fight, the guards won't give up and will will try to chase you down. Considering that even on normal difficulty, Far Cry 2 was not an easy game, additional fights were seen as an annoying nuisance for most players. The combat in this game is difficult not because of good enemy AI, but because you are always outnumbered and can easily die after a few shots. Far Cry 2 is punishing the player for trying to mindlessly rush to the next objective, so you are forced to carefully plan your next move. And honestly, it's not a bad thing, they just simply overdid with the amount of those unnecessary fights. Another big problem of this game is that outside of the combat there is simply nothing else to do. The open world of Far Cry 2 is empty and lifeless. It has no civilians outside story NPCs, and every location is filled with the same dudes with guns who want to kill you. And outside hunt for diamonds there are no side activities. The story in this game is nothing but a premise for all those fights, and the choice between two factions doesn't actually change anything. Far Cry 2 basically gives you tools and direction to the next objective, and then you are free to solve the task in whatever way you want. And that's another reason why this game is so hated, because if you don't want to improvise and figure out interesting tactics on your own, it's going to become repetitive and boring quite fast. For now, I'm not going to give my final judgment about the gameplay of Far Cry 2. Yes, I was bored with this game back in 2008, but that's the whole point of replaying it now, to see if my opinion about it will change after all these years. And before concluding this video, I want to say a few words about the things that I do like in Far Cry 2. My biggest pleasure is how the interface is designed in this game. Far Cry 2 has a minimalistic HUD that appears on the screen only when you need it, and it makes the game more immersive. Even the crosshair is disabled by default, and the map is not some abstract menu screen, but an actual in-game object. This is really awesome, and it's a shame that such an interesting approach in UI design is still quite rare in modern games. Lastly, even though there's no variety in enemy types, the gunplay in Far Cry 2 feels great. I know that some people complain that the guns are starting to jam too fast, but I can't say that I had much trouble with that personally. The visuals are a mixed bag. I love the atmosphere, and sometimes the game can look really good, especially during the sunset. But that brown color palette is just terrible. It looks so bland and uninspiring, not to mention how hard it is to spot the enemies in such monotonous backgrounds. I usually try to avoid installing mods on games that I'm planning to review because I want to get an authentic experience, but in case of Far Cry 2, I'll make an exception and will try to find a mod to fix the color. If you have any suggestions, or maybe you know some tips about how to make this game less repetitive, feel free to post them in the comments. Thanks for watching, don't forget to subscribe, and I hope to see you guys again on my YouTube channel.